Hello, I'm Deputy Chief Deputy J. Taylor of the Atlanta Bureau of Police Services. In February of 1987, the National Democratic Committee advised the City of Atlanta that they had been chosen to host the 1988 Democratic Convention. Shortly thereafter, I was chosen to head a task force that would develop a security plan that would ensure that we would have a safe and uninterrupted convention. My first meeting was with the Democratic security staff. At that meeting, they advised us that they felt, based on their experience in other cities, that we would need a minimum of 3,000 police officers to be able to ensure a safe convention. In order to be able to gather support from surrounding areas, a meeting was called with all the department heads of the metropolitan area, where we solicited their support in the event that we should need it. That support was readily given. We then began a series of meetings with the Planning Committee, and it became readily apparent to us that it would be virtually impossible for us to coordinate the loan of police officers from all metropolitan jurisdictions. It was therefore decided that we should concentrate our attention on the large police agencies within the metropolitan area. And to that extent, we decided that we would try to come up with 1,400 police officers in order to provide security for the convention from the following agencies: the Fulton County Police Department, the Fulton County Sheriff Department, the Georgia State Patrol, the GBI, the Atlanta Bureau of Police Services, Secret Service, and the FBI. We received a commitment from the head of those departments and from the governor of the state of Georgia that these resources would be made available to Chief Redding at his request. And to that extent, a second committee was formed. This committee headed by Chief Redding, and on that committee is Sheriff Richard Langford, Chief Clinton Chafin, and Robert Hamrick, representing all of the resources of the state of Georgia. With that in mind, we now had an assurance from these department heads that we had a commitment from them to provide a minimum of 1,400 police officers dedicated to the convention, which would allow us to continue to provide service to the citizens of the city of Atlanta, to the state of Georgia, and to the county, Fulton County. I suppose one of the things that is of concern to you here today, and that is, how will this convention affect you and your family? I'm hopeful during the 4 days in which the convention will be here, which is July the 18th through the 22nd, keeping in mind the fact that we will probably go to 12-hour shifts around the 15th through the 22nd, but again, the convention is the 18th through the 22nd. It will affect you as follows. Every officer committed to this convention and those that were remaining on their assignments will be required to work 12-hour shifts. It will also mean that you will not have off days, that you will not be able to take vacation, and I suppose of critical importance to many of you, that we will not allow you to work extra jobs during that time. The issues of compensation has not been resolved, but be assured that those of you not working extra jobs, there will be adequate compensation for you. There have been some discussion as to who will be in charge of what activity. Let me just say this as a point of clarity. There will be a few dedicated work sites, but all in all, we will be working from a pool of personnel assigned as needed. The dedicated work sites are as follows. The Atlanta Bureau of Police Services will provide perimeter security for the Omni itself. This is where the actual convention will be held. The Georgia State Patrol will provide perimeter and internal security at the World Congress Center. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation will provide escort service, along with the State Patrol, will provide escort service for the protectees and the Democratic VIPs. Now, the FBI has agreed to provide a support role in that they will assist with the intelligence gathering operation, which will be known as ITAG. They will also assist with SWAT operations and EOD activities. All other personnel that are assigned, as I indicated earlier, will be assigned to a pool. Now, I suppose you're wondering, what is the Democratic Convention? The Democratic Convention consists of 6,500 delegates alternates, and their families. These delegates and alternates will be in our city for the purpose of taking care of the business of the Democratic Party and selecting or choosing a presidential candidate. We will also have 15,000 members of the media. These members of the media will be from all over the world. And during their stay in Atlanta, Atlanta will become the spotlight of the entire world. No city in this world will receive as much attention as Atlanta will between July 15th and the 22nd. These members of the media have a charge of ensuring that they provide their hometown a story every day. It is my hope and my prayer that their stories will reflect positively on our city. I would hope that at no time will a report leave this city indicating that the men and women of the law enforcement community in the state of Georgia was any way other than professional. Now, in addition to the media, I think a primary concern to us will be the fact that we will have in excess of 100,000 persons in our city for the express purpose of exercising their First Amendment rights. Earlier this year, I had an opportunity, along with Chief Redding, to visit San Francisco and to communicate and talk with the people that coordinated the security during the 1984 convention. And they shared with us their concerns and issues that was raised during that convention. For instance, during one demonstration, there was 100,000 persons that marched just to advocate gay lesbians' rights. I can assume that we will probably have at least 100,000 persons in this city that will be here for the purpose of exercising their First Amendment rights, regardless of the topic. Now, the only good thing about that, I suppose, is that we know that 95 to 180% of those persons will be here for the express purpose of having a good time and to let everybody know that they are concerned about a particular issue. Now, there will probably be 1 or 2% of those persons that are here for the express purpose of being arrested. Now, you can be assured that we will accommodate those persons that insist upon being arrested. But at the same time, we will portray an image of professionalism in whatever we do. The image of the state is critically important, and the success of this convention and the security of this convention rest in your hands. Only by demonstrating a professional attitude and tolerance will we be able to ensure that we have a peaceful convention, that we will have an orderly demonstration, and everybody will leave the city of Atlanta feeling that we or they have been in a city that has a professional law enforcement agency and courteous citizens. The training that you're about to receive is to provide you with all of the knowledge and information that we have, in the hope that we be able to anticipate every possible scenario that can occur during this convention. In addition to the training, we will provide you with a law enforcement booklet that will provide you with the phone numbers of all key locations that will be used during the convention. This law enforcement bulletin will also provide you with phone numbers and other pertinent information that you will need to be able to provide the citizens with information. For instance, many of you are not familiar with the city of Atlanta, so we will make sure that you could be able to provide any visitor to our city with the location of any important site and the direction to that site should they ask you about it. As we indicated earlier, it is the responsibility of the city of Atlanta and the other 6 law enforcement agencies to provide overall security within the city limits of Atlanta. In addition to providing overall security for the city, the Secret Service has the primary responsibility of protecting the candidates and the convention center itself. I have with me here today Mr. Bill Hoskins, who is the agent in charge of the Secret Service office here in Atlanta. And at this time, I would like for Mr. Bill Hoskins to come up and to share with you his role, or the role of the Secret Service during this convention. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Chief Taylor. I'm Bill Hoskins, Special Agent in charge of the Secret Service here in Atlanta. I welcome this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the history of the Secret Service, how we got in the protection business, and what our role will be in the Democratic National Convention. The Secret Service was organized in 1865, right after the Civil War, to combat counterfeiting, which is still one of our roles today. In 1901, after the assassination of President McKinley, the Secret Service was directed to begin protecting the President of the United States. McKinley had been the third president assassinated in a 36-year period following the assassination of Lincoln and President Garfield. The Secret Service remained a rather small government agency until the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963. Following the Kennedy assassination, at which time we only had about 350 special agents, our role has grown dramatically in the area of protection and in investigation. Until today, we have approximately 2,000 special agents. In 1968, following the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy, following the California primary, President Johnson directed us that very week to begin protecting the major presidential candidates. That executive order was later enacted into law by Congress, and since 1968, we've had the responsibility to protect the major presidential candidates of the United States. Along with this role, we have then taken over a security function in the Democratic and Republican National Conventions. How do we do this? We do this basically like we would prepare for any major presidential or vice presidential visit here in the United States. Jim Posey of our Atlanta office has been selected as our DNC coordinator, and he's currently working with Chief Taylor and others to develop a security plan to protect our candidates during the 1988 Democratic Convention. We'll begin at the airports where the candidates will arrive, which could be one of any of the three major airports here in the Atlanta area. We'll develop a secure motorcade route. We'll develop motorcades. We will set up a security plan for the sites that these candidates will visit, the events that they will attend, the hotels or residences they will spend nights in. And of course, our major function here will be to coordinate the security at the Omni along with Chief Taylor and the Atlanta Police Department. The other function that we will be involved in during the convention time period has to do with the coordination of the intelligence gathering that might affect any of the candidates that we're protecting. When the convention's over, hopefully on Thursday night, we will then have a nominee for the President and a nominee for the Vice President of the United States, at which time we'll commence protection for them and their spouses. Jim Posey and our advance team are coordinating our security needs with Chief Taylor and others in the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. During the convention time period, the eyes of the world are going to be on Atlanta, and I'm confident that we will do our jobs in such a professional manner that nothing but praise and a secure environment will be the results of our efforts. I thank you, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the weeks and months ahead.
To Spock on an airplane from Cleveland to New York. And they talked for a couple of hours, waiting for the plane and then on the flight en route. And he understood how sincere Dr. Spock was, but he understood also that Dr. Spock didn't know how to mobilize a national movement to end the war. And then not long after that, a young Buddhist monk came from Vietnam, and he came to express the point of view of that third force, that group of Buddhists that were neither supporters of the U.S. nor were they supporters of the Viet Cong, but simply people who wanted to be left alone in order to help their own country develop peaceably. And he listened to this young monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, describe and discuss the views of people of Vietnam, the Vietnamese. And I think that, as much as anything else, moved him to become publicly involved. And he felt as though the problems of our nation were being affected by the war in Vietnam. He said, the bombs you drop on Vietnam will explode at home. in unemployment and inflation and other social problems. And he saw us draining our national resources by sending money abroad to fight a war that he felt was both unnecessary and unjust. And he decided that, as he said, he could no longer segregate his conscience, that injustice anywhere was a threat to justice everywhere, and that somehow America had to find another way to approach the question of Vietnam.
In your years of dealing with him, did he ever question whether his personal sacrifices were worthwhile?
I don't think Martin Luther King ever felt that he was making a great personal sacrifice. He had been stabbed, he had been jailed, he had turned down jobs that offered him lots of money. But Martin Luther King felt that the most rewarding thing about his life was the opportunity to serve his nation and to serve his people. And I think he did that with no regrets. And he even made a joke about death, about his death and about the death of the rest of us. And he always said that if a man hasn't found something that he'll die for, he really doesn't know what he's living for. And he believed that it was important to believe in something so strongly that if required to, you would willingly give your life for that. And so I think Martin Luther King lived his life and enjoyed his life and did so with no regrets, because I think he found the true meaning of life. And that meaning of life is in service to others.
Did he ever talk about his hopes and concerns for his children?
Martin Luther King was very concerned about his children. He loved his children, and he was very anxious about the fact that he was not able to spend more time with them. One of the reasons why he went home every weekend from almost anywhere we were in the country was that he felt as though it was important for him to be at church, in Ebenezer Church, with his family, and that at least one day he might have dinner with them and stay in touch with them. He believed that the quality of their life together had to be deep enough and serious enough and significant enough to overcome the fact that they didn't spend much time together.
What is the significance of the national holiday in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
A national holiday in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is extremely significant to this nation. This nation has only recognized 2 Americans previously with national holidays. Now, that's George Washington, the founder of our country, and Abraham Lincoln, who brought our country together, North and South, and reunited our country. Martin Luther King reunited our country racially, as Lincoln united our country geographically. He set us free of segregation and free of the burden of trying to live as 2 societies, one black and one white. And that was a liberation every bit as important as George Washington's liberation from the British. And I think the fact that the people of the United States, that the Congress of the United States, that the President of the United States signed into law legislation that honored the achievements of Martin's reuniting the country, or uniting the country, across racial lines, and that it puts him alongside the founding fathers of our nation, right alongside George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, as one who made a major contribution to the United States of America. But I think more significant than even George Washington or Abraham Lincoln is that Martin was the first of our national leaders to help our nation to achieve its goals without violence. He did not engage in the destruction of either person nor property. He decided that we could redeem the soul of America, and that America could overcome racism and poverty and war without violence, In fact, he felt that violence only begat more violence, and that only nonviolence could help America really to redeem her soul. And so I think the significance of this holiday is a beginning realization that it's important for our country to be united across the lines of race and of class, and also that it's important for us to resolve our problems here at home, in our own families, and in the world at large, and to resolve them without violence.
How should the holiday be observed?
I think it's most appropriate for us to observe the holiday celebrating Martin Luther King's birth by trying to make our own lives a bit more loving, a bit more caring, a bit more concerned about those less fortunate, a bit more open to those with whom we disagree, a bit more understanding of those who differ. It's important for us to celebrate the nonviolent aspect of Martin's birthday, because I think history will record that as the most powerful contribution that he was able to make through his life.
You were a close friend of Dr. King. Can you tell us about two important aspects of his life? First, who and what molded his character before he became involved in the movement, and what were some of his qualities as a leader?
Martin Luther King's character was molded by a strong family and a strong church. Daddy King and Mama King raised him to be a leader. He was standing up in front of the Sunday school making speeches when he was just a little tot. He was preaching in Ebenezer when he was in high school. His education was assured in that his parents had worked hard for education. In fact, Daddy King didn't graduate from college until he was almost 30. And he wanted more than anything else for his son to graduate from college and to go on to graduate school. And he knew the importance of that kind of quality education. And so I think out of those strong influences, the life and character of Martin Luther King was shaped. Morehouse College also, with Dr. Benjamin Mays, gave him a kind of role model for leadership, a kind of standard of excellence in his speech and in his study and his personal character. That was an important contribution toward leadership. But you have to remember that Martin's father was a preacher, but also his grandfather was a preacher. He was a product of the Black Baptist Church. His grandfather had been the treasurer of the National Baptist Convention and had preached from one end of this country to the other. His father was an outstanding evangelist and a civil rights leader before Martin was born. And so Martin represented a history and a heritage of people who were dedicated to the service of others and who were committed to doing something in behalf of the least of these, God's children. I think that that shaped Martin as much as anything else. He was also shaped by his life in the city of Atlanta, a city that was not only a city of churches and universities, but a city where he worked alongside the poor, where he studied with poor people, where he was forced to realize that the life that he lived was an exceptional opportunity that had been afforded him by the grace of God. That it was just a gift of God that he was born in this family instead of in another family where he might not have had educational opportunities, or good clothes to wear, or the kind of food that was on the table every day in his household. And he was very sensitive to those around him who were less fortunate. And he wanted to do something, even as a child, to help those around him to enjoy the kinds of life and blessings that he enjoyed. And I think that shaped Martin's character. And I think that those influences were profound influences on his life throughout his life. There was another phase to that you mentioned.
What were some of the qualities that Dr. King possessed as a leader?
The qualities that Dr. King possessed as a leader most was the willingness to sacrifice himself totally for others. He was concerned so much about those who had not had the opportunities that he had in life that he was literally willing to give his life for them. And when he approached a problem, he approached it totally. There was no, I'll try this out and then back off and see if it works or not. It was a commitment to do something about the life that the poor and black citizens of this United States shared with others. And I think that dedication to others, he was not concerned about money. He was not concerned about fame. It hurt him when people tried to distort his image or what he was trying to say or do. But he kind of understood that too as part of the price he would have to pay to move the society forward into a little better way of working with people. Martin was also a detailed tactician. He not only thought about the long-range goals, but he thought about the 1, 2, 3 steps that were necessary to get there. He started with Rosa Parks and the Montgomery Improvement Association, and his first task was to get out a mimeograph brochure announcing the boycott. And so he started with the kind of hands-on work of preparing a handbill for a mass meeting that launched the boycott. And he was always conscious of those kinds of things. If there was a mass meeting, he'd want to know, how many handbills did you get out? Where did you take them? How big is the church? And he was acutely aware of all of the little details of the movement, as well as the long-range goal and the big picture. He was also aware that you had to bring people together, that in the United States of America, it took 51% to be a majority, and that black people were only 11%. And so it was necessary in order to bring change. In fact, if we were going to have change at all, the task was not only to mobilize the 11% population, which is black. He had to mobilize 40% of the white population to join with them to create a majority. And I always say that Martin Luther King's primary goal and objective was not leading black people. Black people led him. He responded to the needs of black people, and he interpreted those needs to the white community. Black people knew what was wrong with segregation. They knew why it was unjust. He didn't need to convince them. He needed to convince the white population that segregation was unhealthy for the total society. And so in addition to mobilizing black citizens to do something for themselves and in their own behalf, he was acutely aware of the need in our society to build a creative majority. And he called that a coalition of goodwill. And he knew that people, black and white, Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish, and Muslim, would have to come together to make a majority that would truly redeem the soul of America and put an end to racism, poverty, and war.
Final question. What did you think and feel when Martin Luther King was assassinated? Did that seem to indicate to you the death of the movement? And do you think that he had a premonition about it?
It's strange looking back on it now, but I'll just go ahead and answer it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Okay. It's strange looking back on it now, but my first reaction was that he was kidding. We had been in his brother's room, AD's room, and I had just come back from a federal court hearing, and I had not called him all day long. And when I came in the room, he was fussing at me for not checking in. And I tried to give some lame excuse, and he picked up a pillow. And he started whipping me over my head with the pillow. And everybody was just so playful. We finally settled down and talked about what had gone on in the courts. And he was laughing and joking and went on up to his room to get ready to go out to dinner. And everybody was sort of clowning around. I was boxing with James Orange in the courtyard, and we heard what we thought was a firecracker. And my first reaction was that a car had backfired and Martin Luther King was faking and clowning and playing like he'd been shot. And he'd joke about things like that all the time. And it wasn't until I ran up the stairs and actually saw that half of his chin had been shot away and that he was laying there in a pool of blood that I realized that he was gone. And I knew instantly that he died almost, as soon as the bullet hit him, that he'd never probably even heard the shot. And my first reaction was that if anybody had earned the reward of a life with God, that he was certainly entitled to the peace that I think, as a Christian, comes with death. But then I began to get mad, and I began to get upset that he was going on to heaven to claim his reward, but leaving us with all his mess. And I didn't think we were adequate to the task. And yet, by the time we got him to the hospital and understood that he was dead, we came back and we gathered together in that same room. And we remembered all of the words that he had taught us, that the movement can never be built around one man, that no one man's life can stand in the way of the freedom of an entire nation. And we knew that it was our responsibility to carry on, and so we pledged our support to the Reverend Ralph Abernathy to go on to Washington to continue the Poor People's Campaign and to see what we could do to make sure that Martin Luther King's dreams became a reality. Ralph preached a wonderful sermon that next day when he said, quoting from the book of Genesis, when Joseph's brothers thought that he was dead, that you may kill the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream. I think the scripture says, here comes the dreamer, let us slay him, and we will see then what will become of his dreams. And so we kind of took seriously that challenge, and we understood that the dreams of Martin Luther King had to be carried on and had to be lived out in our lives, and that he had sent us, really, as he said, to the mountaintop. And even though he could not go with us to the promised land, he had promised us that the land was just on the other side, that we didn't have far to go. And so we were committed, I think, right then and there to carry on.